3.
Hey, PP. Oh, we're live on the air too. Ooh. I thought we were just live on the internet, but we are live back on the air as well here on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, online at WTK.com. And the crew, the fellas are back with us, the MGoBlog Roundtable. And by the fellas, Craig Ross is back. Now, that does not mean that Seth Fisher and Brian Cook are not my guys, because they are. You guys know you're my guys. But the amount of questions we got about where is Craig? When's Craig coming back? What happened to Craig? Are you guys keeping Craig off? No, Craig was just on vacation and he is back this morning. Craig Ross, how are you?
I'm doing fine. You know, one thing I wasn't thinking about talking about at all, but just for a second, I was in Kona, and I do my early morning 6 a.m. 2-mile walk along the Leahy Drive on the ocean there. And I expected, because I was doing it so early, I wouldn't get the normal of, and I always wear a Michigan shirt, I wouldn't get the normal of Go Blues that I usually get, because it was mostly like street people. And but it was stunning. There was not one day when someone didn't yell Go Blue at me doing my jog down a Leahy Drive. So it's still, Michigan is still everywhere. And this, you're talking about, a pretty isolated place where, and yet it's still, one day I had 6. I had a Saturday morning when there were more people on the street. I had 6 people yell Go Blue at me, including a couple people in Washington hats. So anyway, Michigan's pervasive, and that may lead into what you guys want to talk about with NIL, I suspect.
Seth Fisher, how are you, my friend?
I'm good. I'm feeling the whole, I was just on the internet and all of a sudden I'm on the radio vibe here. That happens.
It happens, right? Brian Cook, how are you this morning?
I'm good. I'm just glad I don't have to talk for a full hour now that Craig's back.
Hey, man, a full hour, the full 5 minutes. We got Craig back. We can sit back, kick back. All right. So listen, we talked about name, image, likeness being leveling the field somewhat, as you guys pointed out, and aptly. Hey, the schools that cheat are just going to find more ways to cheat, and you're absolutely right. But now that the NCAA came out and said, no rules, make your own rules with name, image, likeness. You write your ticket. We have no policy. Why wouldn't you have the most permissive name, image, likeness policy around? You talk about not being able to compete with the cheaters until they said you can write your own rules. You determine what's legal for all intents and purposes. Is this not as significant is it less significant than I'm making it out to be? Because I think it's extremely significant that they have basically abdicated responsibility on this thing and said, hey, do what you want to do.
Well, you do still have to comply with your state laws. So there will be kind of a race to the, I'm not going to say bottom, a race at the top in terms of permissivity of these laws that we're already seeing in SEC country. So there is going to be, I think, a little bit of a difference, but the NCAA was going to force teams to comply with state law and not change the rules. So then half the country gets nothing, just untenable. So they never got any federal help, and you can't, there was really no choice other than to do this, because there's so many different state laws saying different things that there's literally nothing the NCAA can say except we throw our hands up, good luck. So here we are.
But is that not from Michigan's perspective, hell yeah, why is that a bad thing for Michigan?
Oh, it's not. Any sort of above the table payments. This is one of the richest athletic departments in the country. This is one of the richest alumni bases in the country. One of the few that supports its own blog. One of the few that every year EDSBS has a charity fundraiser for New American Pathways, and Michigan wins that every year, and they're so bored that Slippery Rock is now finishing in the top 10 every year. So there's some money floating around that is going to start getting directed towards athletes, and I welcome it.
Yeah, so Seth, I asked this question to Ira earlier. Why wouldn't what's the downside of permissivity? Like Brian said, why wouldn't you ask for forgiveness as opposed to permission with any of this?
Oh gosh, I mean, from Michigan's perspective, I was trying to think of like it's probably not from a fan perspective at all. From a fan perspective, we're like, yeah, throw all the money at them. Michigan has some certain relationships, Meyer, for example, where they don't want alcohol and drugs involved. They don't want, gambling is an issue because gambling's legal in Michigan now. So some of those topics, I think, are where Michigan's going to hit a wall. They have some existing relationships where they don't want their players. They don't want their players kind of signing deals to compete with what they're doing. I don't know how the whole shoe deal is going to work now, right? Like they get a ton of money from Nike. What if Adidas wants to sponsor one athlete? Those are some of those things that were worked out from the on the state level, and Michigan really just crafted theirs based off of their state. I really understand why the NCAA didn't just look at like one of the state laws and say, okay, let's just that law makes sense. Let's just go with that one. But that's what the Michigan state law says, is that it can't conflict with the university's own thing. So like a shoe deal is off for our guys.
Yeah, so the Michigan deal doesn't go into effect till next year, though, right?
No, it doesn't. So there's going to be this period where Michigan is not bound by state law because it doesn't exist yet, but they're going to have to comply when that comes in. I think that a shoe deal is not necessarily off the table for the athletes. It would just have to come from Nike.
Right.
And I think you're going to see Nike want to lock those deals in, right? Because if you have a guy coming out like Aiden Hutchinson, like if he's at Michigan, Nike sort of has this exclusive window to sign him. And then if he goes and gets drafted in the first round, like it's open season. So I think that you are going to see guys at Michigan take deals from Nike, and it's going to be a major part of recruiting guys, not only to the school, but to stay on campus. And I always bring up Iggy Brazdeikis about this because he would have gotten probably a 6-figure deal, and then he probably wouldn't have gone over to the second round of the draft in the G League, right? Because honestly, college is more fun than the G League, right?
Craig, what do you think, man? Does this signal in a new era of competition or Michigan's relevance with more prospects on the recruiting trail? Does this signal a change in that way, this new name, image, likeness era that we're in now?
Well, yes, but let me go back to one thing. I'm not sure state laws amount to much here because inevitably every state is going to have to go the way of the most liberal, quote, liberal construction. And I look, New Mexico's law goes into effect today, and it says that any third party can pay for an athlete's food, shelter, medical expenses, whatever. Doesn't say they have to do anything. It just says any third party can come in and do that. And so I believe that implies that's where everyone will be and have to be, because everyone's got to compete. Beyond that, I don't see the Michigan laws, as even the one that's supposed to be in effect next July, I think, has much of an impact.
I just want to clarify real quick. I was speaking, the University of Michigan said that they're going to use the Michigan law as their basis for their NI. They came out with that today. So they're going to use the law as their basis right now for what their policy is going to be.
But I don't see any restriction in the law. In other words, I don't see any restriction whatsoever in the Michigan law. I mean, I'm looking at the House bill in my hand right now, and it says that all the institutions what they can't do, and it just says what they can't do, and what they can't do is prevent a student from fully participating in athletics based upon the student earning compensation as a result of the student's use of his or her name, image, or likeness rights. That's nothing. That's nothing. And so, I mean, the law isn't providing any particular limitation so far as I can see. Now, I haven't gone in and fly spec'd it, but it sure looks to me like the law isn't a limitation. It's just saying, hey, it's a limitation on what the schools can do and vis-a-vis the student athlete, but it's saying the student athlete can do whatever the hell he or she wants to do. And and whether in fact, let's say, I mean, I even have a question. Let's say an individual gets a beer deal. As I look at the Michigan law, I'm not sure the university has any ability to stop that. In other words, it isn't clear to me that the university can come in and say, "Oh no beer deals."
I think that they can stop it for someone who's not 21.
Yeah,
Maybe
maybe
a significant
that's
portion
true.
of the roster.
Yeah,
so,
yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah.
But assuming that you're dealing with an adult or a 21-year-old, then yeah.
Well, we got to get them to stay on the roster till they're 21, and that's
Yeah.
hopefully this is going to help with that because that's been kind of an issue lately.
I mean, the other questions I've got are, we're talking selling your name, image, likeness. I mean, the vision is okay for, I think Jordan Bohannon is selling firecrackers this week or something like that. Is that right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
It's like the most Iowa sponsorship deal.
I know. And so, right. So, I mean, but I'm not sure that there has to be any quid pro quo. I'm not sure that somebody just can't, that a person just can't come in and say, I like this kid. I'm going to give him $30,000 if he goes to Michigan, or at the end of the year, if he stays there all year and is whatever the conditions are. I don't think necessarily there has to be anything that student athlete does necessarily for the person paying the money. I mean, after all,
there's an implication that because they'd be leveraging their name, image, and likeness rights, that you'd actually have to, do that. That
I think that's right as a matter of implication, but is Will Wade still coaching at LSU?
Yes.
Yes. And is the NCAA going to do anything about it? And do these cases become 1,000 times more difficult to prosecute once money is free flowing anyway? He goes, yeah, I did something for him. I shoveled his driveway a couple of times.
That would be extremely funny, though, as if like a couple of days after NIL, Will Wade gets deep sixed by the NCAA. I am here for that.
Son-in-law. Remember, we found out live on the air, Mark Emmert's son-in-law is the AD at LSU. so they have the heads up. They know what's coming when it's coming. They'll always be prepared at LSU. And so it gets back to my I get your point, Craig. Mm-hmm. And you're saying even if that's an issue, even if it's maybe gonna get dinged down the line that, hey, you paid this kid $30,000 and he didn't really do anything. Why wouldn't you just allow that? And then down the line say, hey, well, we didn't know that there was no rule saying that wasn't allowed. Yeah. Nothing specific. So we thought it was okay. Why wouldn't, I'm not saying Michigan do that, but why wouldn't that sort of thought process be the prevailing sentiment here for, other schools that were inclined to otherwise be cheating?
Yeah, I think they'll have fig leaves, right? There will be some sort of event where the guy wears a shirt or something, and just to give yourself some plausible deniability. Yes, thank you. Good job, Craig. If you're on the radio, Craig has a picture of my face on a shirt that he is holding up. I have a story about Mexican soccer that is sort of relevant here.
Okay.
There's a guy whose last name is Corona. And the problem is the shirt sponsor of the team he plays for is Tecate. And so they call him Tecatito. Like, that's on his jersey. That's what he's called. Corona is not his name anymore because he plays for the wrong team. Life finds a way, right? It's Jurassic Park. It's we're gonna make it, guys. We're gonna get through all of these conflicts, and people are gonna make it.
Yeah, I'm not even, the conflict that Craig or that Seth brought up. I'm not even sure that that's gonna be that much of an issue. I think certainly while a student athlete is competing, so in competition, he can't go out there in Adidas shoes, right? But outside of competition, could he be endorsing? Could he wear Dame Lillards and say, hey, check out these Dame Lillards I have on? I think that that'll be fine for a student athlete outside of competition, even though it's a competing product with the university, as long as he isn't rocking Michigan garb when he does it. I think that will fly. And that's an interesting question. The usage of the institution's trademarks. So the Block M or Michigan, how permissive will they be with that? Because that's another layer of competition. It certainly enhances the marketability of the student athlete. Nebraska yesterday, they deviated from state law and said, hey, you know what? We are going to craft our own policy that allows our student athletes to use the Nebraska trademarks on a, per approval basis. That, I think, is something that a department like Michigan's trademark department is going to have to be more lenient on, I think.
Well, you're talking about selling jerseys. I mean, just to sell a Michigan jersey, you have to, with a name on the back of it, which is probably going to be one of the major income sources for these players, you're going to have to get Michigan's approval on those licenses, right? And you can't just show a picture of a guy wearing a number 4 and know that it's Dan Villari, right? You're going to have the Michigan stuff on there with him standing on top of a Buckeye saying Dan Villari would have won, and then you have like the whole picture, right?
That's good, Seth.
Yeah. I've been thinking about these things. I'm trying to figure out where I fit in, right? Where can I get my NIL? I need to know what my level of
as I'm trying, what I've been trying to figure out is what is the NCAA doing, if not feigning they're not even pretending to, put together any rules. There's going to be no enforcement of amateurism in this regard. So, man, what purpose are you serving at this point if you're the NCAA? If you have no presence at all with name, image, likeness, and is this maybe the turning point, that sea change moment where the big time institutions like a Michigan says, you know what? Yeah, we're crafting a policy that is good for us. I don't give a damn what it means for Purdue or Indiana or the rest of the Big Ten. This is about Michigan and what we can do to compete. That might signal the end of, the broader concept of the NCAA, but the power conferences, I think this might be the biggest step toward a split that we've seen to this point. I wonder if you guys agree.
I mean, I don't think we're ever going to see a split because, Michigan needs G5 teams, G6 teams to play in their non-conference schedule so they can have 7 home games or they can have more games at Chrysler. And like the NCAA tournament is going to keep the NCAA together because part of the appeal of that is sometimes Duke gets dunked on by Marist or Mercer. Which one? Well, I forget. Mercer. Yeah. And so any sort of like threat to the structure of the NCAA tournament will be a thing that actually turns fans off. I mean, they don't care about guys getting paid money because it's been an open secret for many years, right? But taking away the ability of, Middle Tennessee State to pants Michigan State on national television, and everybody knows who Giddy Potts' name is, like that would be something that would hurt the bottom line. So the NCAA will stick together. They do a lot of stuff that isn't enforcing rules because they don't do any of that, right? And, I think that we're going to see very little actually change in terms of the structure of the competition and where recruits go because they're already going to the top teams, and this isn't going to change much. It might balance things out sort of at the top, but it's not going to change what happens. The bigger change is the free transfers. So that is something that I think might change a lot of things, but we've had that for a couple of years now, and we were still getting NCAA upsets. Like, that A. Smith kid from Oral Roberts, he didn't transfer up, and they nuked a couple teams in the tournament. So I think it'll basically be close to the status quo, except it'll be a lot less hypocritical.
So how about this, Brian? How is this not? So the one thing I just said, what is the NCAA doing? The one thing that they said they're going to enforce is now no pay for play. Like, okay.
Okay.
And no, right. And no recruiting inducements. Like how is this not a recruiting inducement?
I mean, I have no idea. If someone associated with Michigan says, like, we have a deal waiting for you, Walter Nolan, if you sign with Michigan.
Which I'm sure is there. I'm sure that's there. I'm sure
Right.
deals for Walter Nolan. Like 20 of them.
But if it's like Stephen Ross, who's like, I've got this new building in New York, I want you to advertise, is that a recruiting inducement or is that a legitimate activity? Because there's a lot of Michigan fans in New York who might want to live in this building. I mean, drawing that line is impossible. So, I mean, I don't even know why they bother. I mean, I do. Because it's PR.
Yeah, it's PR because it's nonsense. It's abject nonsense because it can't happen. Of course, there's going to be recruiting inducements. That's the whole point. That's the whole freaking point.
Right.
And to this and so to say that they don't enforce anything as it is. So I mean, now they said there's no rules, but we're going to enforce them. Right.
Okay, so Seth Fisher, are you going to watch Walter Nolan now? How about now, Seth?
Oh God, you know what? Now the sky is falling. I can't watch anything. It's just dark out there. There's nothing to see.
You ought to think Michigan has a better chance now, right?
I do. I do. But also, I think Alabama's probably going to be getting into the game too, right? So I don't know how much it changes for the Walter Nolans of the world.
Yeah, I mean, going to the playoffs is still a huge deal for these guys. Not just to be seen, but like they want to play with the best players. They want to play against the best teams. They want to play on the biggest stage. Michigan's always been helped by the fact that we have the biggest stadium. But if Michigan doesn't look like a good team this year, then I mean that's why I'm not. That's why I'm not watching your movie, Sam. That's why I'm not picking this up. I don't trust Michigan to have a good enough season to look like a place where Walter Nolan thinks he can win next year.
Right. All right. So ponder this question as we head to the break, and I'm sure we'll be discussing it with the people as well that are watching us on YouTube and on Twitter and on Facebook Live. But what about the effect on the game, the support for the game, the fan base? We've gotten emails, and I will read one to you on the other side where you got a fan say, I'm totally sickened by this. This is disgusting to me. We got fans saying they aren't going to watch the sport anymore, watch college athletics anymore. Do you believe that is going to be a consequence of where we are now headed when it comes to compensating student athletes? Ponder that during the break. We will get your responses on the other side here on the MGoBlog Roundtable on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, The Ticket.
Trying real hard to remember that we're still on and not swear about that.
Craig, I don't think you've screwed up in that respect, have you so far?
I think I did once.
You did once?
And if you can cuss here, you're okay.
Yeah, it's not over.
It's not FCC regulated, I
Correct.
suppose. It's still not a good habit to be in.
Yeah, especially if you have young kids, probably.
Oh, that's it's far too late for that.
That's right.
Try to classify them as daddy's sports words.
Daddy's sports words. That's
Yeah.
good. I like that. So here's the question I've got is, it's hard for me to figure out exactly what the NCAA is actually going to do. I mean, they'll run their championships. Okay, they'll do that. But I don't even think they can regulate the number of scholarships.
I mean, the NCAA is going to keep doing what they've been doing, which is, they got to make TV, they got to make money, and they run the NCAA tournament.
Right. But I mean, for example, Michigan gets 11.7, I think, scholarships in baseball. What if Stephen Ross comes in and says, hey, I'm going to endow 3 scholarships?
I mean, you could functionally do that without actually doing it. So,
yeah, and so what I see is, and my guess is this will happen across the board in lots of schools, where all of a sudden people who are getting in baseball half scholarships, hey, we want to compete in baseball, and we've got a big guy out there who's willing to put a lot of money down on the line to endow scholarships. And so while the University of Michigan only has 11.7, here at Ohio U, we're going to have 25. And we'll have 25 guys on full scholarship. I mean, I suspect sport by sport, you're going to see these sort of pockets because I don't see how the NCAA under these rules can even enforce scholarship
That's
limitations.
the Supreme Court decision, right? The Supreme Court decision said that they can't limit the academic
Right.
any academic payments to players, which I mean the first thing I thought of was that like what about these
Yeah.
partial scholarships and scholarship limits
Yeah.
across sports?
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I think that's right. I mean, it's to some extent, I think people jumped on the Kavanaugh concurring opinion way too heavily. No one
Yeah.
else signed on to that opinion, but what you know, and the majority opinion is fairly narrow. But the more I, at least seemingly, but you've just hit the right point, Seth. I mean, in terms of scholarship limitations, it seems to me under the majority opinion, they're theoretically gone.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to ask you. Actually, I mean, I'm not an attorney. I was hoping an attorney would look at that and tell me I'm wrong, but I mean,
No,
that
I
was
don't
the
think
big thing
you're
that I
wrong.
read out of that.
Yeah, no, I don't think you're wrong.
I mean, does that change football scholarships too? I mean, is the 85 limit done?
Sure. I mean, I think the 85. Yeah. I mean, you say, okay, we're going to pay for 85, but I mean, there's two possibilities. One is third parties paying for more, and the second is a reading of the Supreme Court opinion saying, wait a minute, we can't be, individual schools can't be limited. Now, there is some language in there saying that conferences can provide limitations or, so I don't know. I
Yeah,
mean, it's
but conferences, I mean, the Big Ten shares its pool. So Indiana's going to be able to have just as large of a team as we do. And
Sure.
there's still a limiting factor because you only have so many spots to play. So once
right,
you
guys,
get to
we are
120 guys on the team.
Coming
Yeah,
back
well-
on the radio. Stand by. Coming back on the radio in 5, 4, 3.
And we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider, Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, online at WTK.com. Sam Webb, Ira Weintraub, side of the county, and the MGoBlog Roundtable crew. We have Seth Fisher, Brian Cook, and Craig Ross is back. I mentioned the other day when we talked about the Division I Council basically coming back and saying, hey, you know what? Any state that does not have an NIL law, the institutions in that state can make their own rules. I said, hey, that's like the Digital Underground song, do what you like. So I agree with you, Anthony Hemphill, who is following us on YouTube. I said the very same thing. This is a new era. A lot of us have been hoping for welcome this, I think, sense of fairness to the equation. Think that this will help balance the equation more in intercollegiate athletics. There are others that feel differently about it, though. Like this emailer who said, and I want you guys to respond to this. Ira and Sam, I know that all this NIL stuff is life, but it sickens me beyond belief. The Rocket Mortgage QB, just another nail in the coffin of college athletics that I've known and loved all my life. This is all very sad for me. He ends with Go Blue, all the same. But does this signal a nail in the coffin of college athletics? What do you think?
I don't. I mean, we've seen a lot of predictions along those lines, with Kurt Flood and free agency in baseball. And we've never seen how people are compensated or how they move really affect the bottom line for sports. And I think that there are some things that I have not liked over the past 10 years, like the transfer rules. I'd prefer it if they were different. I understand why they're not different, but that didn't really prevent me from watching the NCAA tournament this year, right? Like, because you grow up on this stuff and you wait for it every year, and it is literally irreplaceable. So when the NCAA tournament was canceled, it was a great void in everybody's lives, and as soon as it was back, everybody was like, thank God this is back. And if Adrian Nunez is leveraging his social media following to get an endorsement, then that's not going to change anything, because they're going to still roll the ball out, and I'm going to be like, okay, what is Caleb Houston going to do? Is he going to do 60% from three? Do I hear 70, 80%? What's happening? So, I think that we respond to what happens on the court. We respond to the drama on the court. We respond to something that is unscripted and has powerful emotional control over us. And if people are bailing, I think they're bailing because Michigan football is in a very sad place, and this is an excuse.
I think that there was a time when athletes just played for the love of the sport. And I'm sure it was very compelling to watch that. The thing is, there's not a single human being on Earth today who was alive during that time.
Craig, what about Craig?
other than Craig Ross and his and whoever else is in his Druid coven. I don't know how that whole thing works, but
Yeah.
that was like by the 1890s, Michigan was paying players.
Yeah.
So and so like this is not like a new thing. This is just something they kited for 100 years and pretended like players weren't getting paid. So if you're expecting the NCAA to change now that players are going to have money, people watch SEC football, and I got some news for you if you think they were just playing for the love of the game.
Well, they probably play for the love of the game when coaches coached for the love of the game, right? But last I checked, coaches have dealer cars, coaches have $1 million salaries, and hey, no one seems to have a problem with that. But when you talk about a player having a dealer car, suddenly it's going to spell the end of college athletics henceforth and forevermore. And I don't see how. And one of the quips I hear, and I'm sure you've heard this too, Craig. Well, the boosters are going to think they have more influence because of the money they're putting. I mean, you mean to tell me they're giving cars to the coaches? They're endowing coaching positions, putting enough money in there to do that, and they're suddenly going to start feeling like they have influence after they can pay the players. I mean, if they're going to feel like that paying the players, they feel like that already.
Well, remember, there was a time because when Canham, who was incredibly cheap and didn't want to pay his coaches, in fact, he lost Johnny Orr to Iowa State for that reason, Bo was going to take the job at Texas A&M. And the reason he didn't was Tom Monahan, because Tom Monahan stepped in and gave Bo a pizza franchise in Columbus, Ohio.
Craig, it's not true. He made his decision and already called Texas A&M and told him no. And then Tom Monahan found him on his way up the stairs. So
okay, well maybe that's correct.
Bo stuck around because he had a good recruiting class coming in. He wanted to get his assistants paid. And so finally, Canham, who was always tight with $1, finally said, "Fine, I'm going to pay your assistants enough that they can live in Ann Arbor." But like that is part of the story, that the NCAA used to be much more effective at its at keeping this down. They didn't stop players from getting paid ever, but they were more effective at keeping it down. And part of that was the coaches didn't make that much money. So when Bo was making $50,000 a year and driving a worse car than you were, well, it wasn't as big of a deal. But I mean, they see the money. And the real fight is still to come. The real fight's over TV money, and that hasn't happened yet. So like the players have seen that they're part of a business. They start from very young. They pour a lot of their own money into preparing themselves to be football players just to get to this level. You know how much like some of these QB gurus cost just to get to like the point where they are? So like these guys have been professionals for a long time. All it does is create it just puts it above board where it was a black market before. It's the only difference that we're going to see.
One thing that you said, Seth, that I absolutely agree with in particular is that this has been going on for a long time. It's been going on certainly since the 1890s, and certainly once Stagg ended up at University of Chicago, because he was willing to do anything and everything.
We made it a history podcast.
Yeah. So I mean, this is nothing new. I don't think that fans are going to say, I'm not showing up to Michigan Stadium because players are being paid. I don't think that's going to happen. I think maybe some people won't show up because they've decided they'd rather drink beer and watch their big screen TV because they got used to it last year, and it may take a while for people to come back. I'm not sure that Michigan Stadium in 2021 is going to look the same as it did in 2018. But I don't think that's going to be because of NIL or the fact that players are getting some piece of the action. That would be surprising to me if very many people said, I'm just not going because of that.
So here's another one. It says between practice time, typical college campus social time, i.e. party time, and possible NIL opportunity time, when will these, quote, student, unquote, athletes have time to study? And don't you think the gap between the NIL haves and NIL have-nots will cause major friction in college locker rooms across the country?
Well, I mean, there's already guys in college locker rooms across the country who are getting a lot of money, and then there's guys who aren't.
Right.
So I don't think that really changes the dynamic at all. I mean, we see this in pro sports too, right? Everybody knows
Say the same thing.
how much all these guys make, and someone's making the veteran minimum. Like, I don't think that really changes anything about there. And it's like,
is there strife on college staffs where every assistant doesn't make the same amount? Is there a strife on athletic campuses where every head coach doesn't make the same? They all put in the same work, but they aren't all compensated at the same level. It's called life. I mean, is this not preparation for real life, that you step into a locker room? Oh, that guy across he's making more than me. I mean, that's like, you got to figure out how to deal with that, right?
Yeah, I don't think that that's really not the status quo already, right? Like, so I think that maybe not everywhere it's the status quo, but at Kentucky it is, right? And Kentucky usually does pretty well despite that. And when they don't do well, it's not like it's because they have internal dissension. It's because they have no idea what they're doing on offense.
Yeah.
So I mean, and the thought that NIL time is going to appreciably cut into the ability to like study is kind of out there, right? Like, you go to the commercial, you tape it in a day. Like, these are not going to be huge blocks of time.
Well, and the other thing is, it seems to me, if the university can connect these things, they can connect NIL with study time. In other words, if you're actually out there selling firecrackers like Jordan Bohannon, you're running a business. And I mean, and so that could be a part of what people end up getting credits for. You could have Business 101, which, incidentally, these guys are gonna have to pay taxes. They should have LLCs.
Greg, you're really on to something. Because I read a story here in the last day where there is an institution that is tying NIL education into the study, into the curriculum, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, so now people who are getting the benefit of NIL presumably are business people. They need to understand about, well, what's an LLC, or how do I file my taxes, or I mean,
I think they're just going to hire agents, and then the agents will deal with all that. That's what agents do.
Maybe, but there's some other potential models. There's some other potential models. In fact, I'm a signatory to a letter to Ord Manuel talking about one of these with two other people, maybe talking about these other sorts of models that might exist. So I don't want to get into too much detail on it right now, but at some point maybe I will. But there is an alternative, and there's also the alternative of people just hiring agents. Hiring an agent who would try and connect you to various business opportunities, make sure that you've got an accountant, make sure that you're not in trouble with the Internal Revenue Service. So there's going to be two things going on. Presumably, on the one hand, you're going to have agents / lawyers in this game. And you're also going to have the universities trying to figure out, well, who are these agents / lawyers that we want to sort of suggest, I assume they can, to their students. And is there some other model? And there is. So,
I mean, there's a strain of a discussion around this that seems to suggest we need to figure everything out right now. That we need to know where the money's going, who's going to, what they're going to advertise, what they can't. I mean, this is an economy. And let me tell you something about planned economies. They never work, right? They just come crashing down. There's a very big one in my lifetime that came down. So, I mean, stop worrying about economies. Like the money's going to find its spot, and they're going to it's going to get a little wild for a little bit, but they'll figure it out. I mean, it's that we figured it out in every single other industry in the world. We can figure this one.
So a couple of our quick hitter topics in the few in 10 or so minutes we have left. So the University of Michigan announced yesterday, or at least there was a story about it yesterday, that they're requiring all Michigan student athletes to get vaccinated. There was some question about how similar or different, college policies were going to be to what they're doing in the NFL, for instance. So they aren't requiring vaccination, but they are requiring unvaccinated people, unvaccinated players to go through very, very strict, adhere to very strict protocols, including separate travel and, mask all the time. And you can't be in the weight room when it's at capacity, all those kinds of things. Michigan is cutting all that out and saying, no, you have to be vaccinated. I like that. I think it's a great idea. What say you?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody should get vaccinated. So,
how much of an issue do you think this will be at the college level compared to how we've seen Taylor Decker for the Lions, Josh Allen for the Bills, Cole Beasley from the Bills. You've heard some players come out and be very outspoken about it and say they are not getting vaccinated. So what do you think?
Where did Taylor Decker go to school that he thinks not getting a vaccination is a good idea? What kind of education is that guy getting? I want to know. I mean, did he go to college? Because we know what vaccines do, right? And we've seen how safe they are, and how they liberate you from this awful disease. So I mean, if Michigan's been recruiting any guys who don't want to take the vaccine, that's kind of on Michigan, right? Like, come on.
Well, I mean, Michigan just lost. I mean, we just didn't compete in the NCAA hockey championship, right? Because of fears of COVID within the program. And so, no, this makes complete sense. It makes complete sense. And I'm glad Michigan's done it. And if Ohio State wants to say, nah, we don't care, all right, that's fine.
Well,
NC State got kicked out of the baseball tournament because they had guys come down with COVID, and then they were mad. And I was
right.
Get a shot, you stupid idiots! At worst, you have like a day where you feel kind of bad, and then you get to compete for a national championship or win like a golf major. There was a guy who was leading a golf major who got COVID and got kicked out, and he lost like $2 million. It's one bad day. Get a vaccine.
If one bad day. I wish it were as simple as saying, hey, if you go to school, if you're educated on the topic, you'll get vaccinated. But, people's passions and political affiliations are tied up in this. And so
I don't know why political affiliation should be. The last two presidents were different parties, and both of them got vaccinated as soon as they possibly could. So
I'm not saying it makes sense. I'm not arguing that it makes sense, Seth. I'm just saying that's where we are. So I wish it were the case that, with a little information would change things. But I think that the most effective way to combat this is what you guys just mentioned. You got teams that have been removed from competition, including an institution or a team here at the University of Michigan. I think that a more compelling argument, unfortunately, is going to be, hey, it's from teammates. Hey, if you don't get vaccinated, you might cost us a game. You might cost us competition. So Taylor Decker's teammates or Josh Allen's teammates, if you don't do this, you could get us put out. Now, that won't be an issue at Michigan because everyone has to get vaccinated to even compete. But I think that more than anything, more than fear of getting sick, more than political, haranguing, none of that is going to be as influential as a teammate telling another teammate you might cost us games, I think.
Yeah, you remember that P chart at Texas where it starts with like really like light colored P and it's like, you're good. And then it gets to like to the bottom and it's dark and it just screams, you're a bad teammate. Oh, I agree with you, Sam. Bad teammates. The worst thing you could possibly be.
Right. And that should not be the reason to get vaccinated. Unfortunately, I think it is going to be for a lot of people. And Ira brought up earlier this morning. Ira, didn't you say Michigan State has done away with all, protocols, no vaccination requirement at all?
Correct. Not student athlete, just for students. Yeah. The building's going to be reopened and et cetera, et cetera. I was reading an article about it yesterday.
That's even more of a reason to be vaccinated because, you're going to be playing institutions that have just totally open policies like that. So
Institutions have to figure out how they can. You got to be functional, right? University of Michigan athletics needs to know that if they send a team to the playoffs, that they're going to be able to stay in the playoffs. Just from an organizational standpoint, you need that kind of protection, and I don't think it's that. I don't think it's wrong for an organization that you essentially work for. I know that's whatever, but you're essentially working for this company, and they are, they can ask you to do certain things in order to protect the company, right? And there are other places you can go if you don't want to be in Michigan. If Michigan loses some recruits over this, I'm kind of fine with that.
I didn't want them anyway.
I agree.
let
them go to wherever Taylor Decker went. Let them infect that school.
I completely agree.
Not just an Ohio State thing. So he got this message via YouTube from Austin Cooper, said that's dumb, no freedom whatsoever. It's BS that anyone should be made to take the vaccine. U of M will lose recruits as a result. That's not the only one. Then another one came through. Yikes! Imagine pushing the vaccine on people and completely dismissing the issues that people are having with the vaccine. Now, there are some exemptions.
Was that from Naomi Klein?
but they are political exemptions, right? But this is my point. You're going to have some pushback.
You're going to have some pushback, but, if you look at, we have tons and tons of data now. We have data from the CDC that states that this is a completely effective vaccine, and there is about a 1 in 30,000 chance that one of the vaccines could have some blood clotting issues. I think 300,000. I'm sorry, that was a mistake.
300.
So, the 2-shot regimes from Pfizer and Moderna do not have those issues, and I'm not listening to the crazy person on Twitter who got banned because they were talking about chemtrails and vaccine issues, because that's crazy. And I don't have to listen to crazy people. Except for Craig.
Well, and you know what, Brian?
I don't want to hear.
Because I have the right to be Typhoid Mary. You're taking away my freedom to be Typhoid Mary. And that's essentially what they're saying.
I want to know, do any of these people have a problem with anything else that college football coaches do to become absolute dictators over their teams?
How much freedom does a college football player have to skip the weight room?
Right. There's these guys' lives are way more controlled than most of ours, and you still have choices. I'm sure Oral Roberts is going to take kids who are unvaccinated. I'm sure wherever Taylor Decker went are going to take kids that are unvaccinated. Those small dumb schools are going to figure out that there's an opportunity for the kinds of guys that Michigan doesn't take. We're fine. I think that there's a loud number of people who want to be loud about it, but they're not very many. And once you get to the level of people who really take athletics seriously and really put the time and effort in, they're not that kind of person. We're talking about athletes. This is their lives. They're willing to put themselves through ungodly amounts of pain and lose their entire childhoods just to do this sport. A vaccine should not be that big of a deal to them.
All right. So speaking of Ohio State, are you guys sad that Dwayne Washington won't be back next year?
It depends on whether they get Marcus Carr or not. But no, I am not sad that he won't be back, especially because he kind of specialized in roasting Eli Brooks. Very good defender, had significant issues with Dwayne Washington. So, yeah, and if Liddell stays in, then that's going to be a big blow for one of the upper level teams in the Big Ten. I saw John Rothstein said that the Big Ten title goes through West Lafayette, and I'm like, buddy, your starting center is going to have to shoot better than 50% for that to be the case. Because is Jay not even going to learn to shoot? Maybe not. So they return a lot, but give me Hunter Dickinson.
They still don't have a point guard there, do they?
Well,
they had the freshman coming up last year who more like a scoring point guard, but
Well, Ivy is going to be the
Ivy,
guy
yeah.
who dominates the ball, even though he's
Yeah.
more of a wing. So
Yeah, and Ivy's not. I mean, they still have a problem to me in the backcourt because they don't really have a distributor. So I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah,
I mean, they'll be good. They'll be
be good.
coached. You know, they'll be coached.
Hey,
But
Rick,
they're-
so here's another one real quick. So you remember last week we had that discussion about, hey, who's going to be the best player from this Michigan freshman class, and all is said and done, and talked about Kobe Buffkin, and
Yeah.
talked about the video with Amani Bates, where no defense was played. It was open run. But since then, another video came out, and it was Kobe Buffkin against Jaden Hardy, and it was again, it's practice. It's not a game. But man, he looked good against Jaden Hardy. Man,
he looked all right.
Here's where I am now, and I said this yesterday. I am now of the mind that the timeline has moved up for him in that he'll be a contributor as a freshman. I thought he was going to be, his minutes would be like Zeb's initially because of his size, but he is noticeably bigger physically, and I think he'll be a contributor as a freshman. And then as a sophomore, he'll be a guy. I just don't know what level of guy yet, but I am ready to say Kobe Buffkin will be a contributor as a freshman. We didn't get your take on it, Craig. We're going to take a few extra minutes to give you a chance to say who you think from this freshman class.
Well, no, I'm a huge Kobe Buffkin fan. I've never thought the take on him was right, that he was weak, because I watched him play and I said, this guy.
You didn't say he was weak.
Well, or not
he
strong.
Can't
Not
finish
strong.
through contact yet. It's
Yeah, I mean, he reminds me of Jalen, and that if you look at Jalen when he was at Michigan his freshman year, was skinny as all get out, but Jalen was extremely wiry and tough, and I feel the same way about Buffkin. If Buffkin is putting a little bit of weight and muscle on, great, but he can play. He could be. I mean, it's hard to say who's going to be the best player in this class. I love Frankie Collins. Buffkin could be the best player. Caleb Houston could be the best player. Musa could be the best player. I don't know. Even hell, Isaiah Barnes. You can't look at him and not see the huge ceiling that Isaiah Barnes has. And so it's an incredible class that Jalen brought in. What I'd like to talk about, because I disagreed with all you guys. I listened last week later in the day because I disagreed with you on Nasir McDonald or Doug McDaniel. I thought you guys were underrating or undervaluing him. And I think he's going to be a really, really nice player. And I didn't see, I didn't share your concerns on this one. And I felt like Jawan should, as soon as that guy said, yeah, I want to go to Michigan, they did the right thing, which was offer him. I like him better than Seth Trimble.
Wow. Okay.
So
Okay.
in any event.
Okay.
But we can talk about that maybe next week, and I'll tell you why I think that.
Okay.
So,
got you down. Good to have you back, Craig. Good to see you, Brian and Seth. And I'll tell you whether or not. I think we might figure out whether you should be watching Walter Nolan videos or not based on this NIL stuff. Get a better bead on that here.
Give me a football season. Give me a football season that doesn't end in
all right.
Send Dan Bellari out to beat Taylor Decker's old team, and then we'll see.
All right, that'll do it for us, folks, and for us on the show until next week as we go off on holiday now. So thanks for listening. Have a happy and safe holiday, and we'll see you again here on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTK, The Ticket, the official voice of University of Michigan Sports, Ann Arbor Accumulate.